Hello and welcome to a new edition of France in Focus. I'm Nadia Sharbi, and this week we're asking a hard-hitting but recurrent question: is France anti-Semitic? Will you join us here at the Jewish Museum of Art and History in the community's historic quarter of the Marais in Paris? Follow me. Founded by a state-approved NGO, the museum opened its doors exactly 20 years ago with the support of the city of Paris and French authorities. The space boasts a range of permanent and temporary exhibits, as well as a library and auditorium, the perfect setting to educate and raise awareness, including on some of the darkest pages of French history.
France is home to the largest Jewish community in Europe, but their quest for a place in French society has been a turbulent one. Jews arrived in Gaul after it was conquered by the Roman Empire more than 2,000 years ago. During the Middle Ages, they were accused of having killed Jesus Christ, and thus forbidden to do jobs other than those related to money lending. The risk of harassment and expulsion constantly hung over their heads. During the French Revolution, they finally obtained full citizenship, unprecedented at the time in Europe. But in the 19th century, anti-Judaism gradually mutated into anti-Semitism, a change embodied by the arrest and trial of Alfred Dreyfus, a Jewish army officer wrongly accused of treason.
The choice to try a Jewish officer for treason played into all of the anti-Semitic stereotypes of the time and fueled this crazy but widespread idea of a Jewish Protestant Freemason conspiracy against the French nation and army.
The First World War brought a wave of political unity to France in the name of patriotism. But anti-Semitism was yet again on the rise by the 1930s, fueled largely by the economic crisis, rising unemployment, and a growing Jewish population as Eastern European Jews fled the pogroms in Central Europe. In the summer of 1940, the Nazis invaded France. The French Republic was replaced by Vichy, and its leader, Marshal Philippe Pétain, enacted anti-Semitic laws.
They were enshrined into law by the Statutes on Jews on October 3, 1940, and ostracized all people with 3 Jewish ancestors from the nation. The Vichy government not only anticipated the Germans' demands, but also made the decision to define Jewishness in solely racial terms.
Then came the infamous Yellow Stars, internment camps and roundups. In all, 75,000 Jews were deported from France. After the Holocaust, Charles de Gaulle and the French Communist Party masked the extent of Jewish deportations with the image of heroic French resistance to Nazis. But the turbulent past resurfaced decades later, as newer generations brought the scale of French collaboration with Nazi anti-Semitism to light.
Well, I'm joined now by our guest, renowned sociologist Michel Vieux-Vorca. Hello, thank you for being with us. There's obviously a political dimension to this. Some in France describe themselves as being not anti-Semitic, but anti-Zionists. What do you make of that?
Well, if you want to have a total image of this question, of this issue, you must also introduce a third category, which is anti-Judaism. During more than 1,000 of years, hatred towards Jews was religious. Then, during the second half of the 19th century, anti-Semitism appeared. That is to say, Jews treated not as a religion, but as a race. Then, Israel as a state was launched in 1948. And at that moment, Israel was criticized. The idea of having a state for Jews was criticized, including by Jews. So at the very beginning, anti-Zionism was not connected with anti-Semitism. But today, you have some people that criticize the government of Israel. These people are not anti-Zionist, but sometimes people say, if you criticize the government of Israel, you criticize, in fact, Jews in general. Then you have people that say Israel should not exist as a state, because for a religious reason, ethical reasons, political reasons, it's better for Jews not to have a state, which is not anti-Semitism. But if you say Jews do not deserve having a state, and I hate the state as I hate Jews, and it's the same people that are in diaspora or in Israel, then anti-Zionism appears. This means that it's a complex issue.
Here in France, there is a sense that the Jewish community feels that it is under attack. Is there a significant rise in the number of anti-Jewish hate crimes in France?
Well, if you deal with murders, yes, you have more murders. It started mainly in 2012 with Mera in Toulouse, killing 3 or 4 young children in a Jewish school. Then we had the attack in the cashier supermarket and other phenomena of that kind. So murders for Islamic reasons in some cases, or for money and due to prejudice in other cases. So is there more prejudice? Difficult to say. What is clear is that if you are a visible Jew, going to the synagogue, if you are a man with a kippah, if your children go to a Jewish school, it is true that there is some danger because hatred must be targeting people like you, visible people. It is true. So for this reason, some people decide to live in strong communities like Sarcelles. Other people decide the contrary. We shall not appear as Jews in the public sphere. Our children will be sent to public school, not to Jewish schools, and so on. And the third category of people decide to live, to go out of France, to Israel for some of them, or to America.
Well, we'll come back to that in just a minute, but let's take a look at this report by France 24's team that went to meet some of the victims of anti-Jewish hate crimes and those who are fighting against prejudice.
Nathalie lived in Romainville in the northern suburbs of Paris for 10 years. She was planning to buy a house there until that day on May the 15th, 2017. She was about to take her daughter to school when she realized that her car had been vandalized.
It was my daughter who first saw what was written, Jew in big letters. I immediately started trembling with fear, but I did not want to show her that I was afraid. There were other drawings, the word Israel, stars. They had also slashed 2 rear tires. I broke down in tears and called the police.
It didn't take long before Nathalie and her family left Romainville for good. Like her, hundreds of Jewish families have fled their homes to escape anti-Semitism. In some towns, the Jewish population has been divided by 6 in recent years. In Clichy-sous-Bois, the synagogue closed its doors due to a lack of worshippers. The rabbi, too, had to leave after his car was burnt out. Many families have found refuge in the nearby town of Le Raincy, a haven of peace and tranquility. Here, kosher stores are well established. There are several Jewish schools, and the community is growing fast.
The community is doing well because there are fewer security problems in Le Raincy in general, and not just for Jewish people. Members of the Jewish community feel comfortable practicing their religion like any other citizen, and the community is very active in local life.
The rabbi, the imam, and the priest all stress the importance of inter-religious dialogue. Local associations, too, are trying to bring the 3 communities together. Coexister intervenes in schools to tackle prejudice and discrimination.
Yes, there's a lot of prejudice against Jewish people, but there isn't more prejudice against Jews than there is against other communities. People are also very prejudiced against Muslims, for example.
Today, Jocelyn, Anna and Cécile are in Rouen in northwestern France to put some 150 high school students to the test.
1 Jew, 1 agnostic, 1 atheist. Who can tell me who's who?
The exercise gets the students talking, allowing them to open up about their experiences. Looking beyond appearances, a challenging task for many, but one that can be taught from a young age.
Well, Michel Vivier, often the charge of anti-Semitism is addressed to Muslims in the French community. Is that fair, or is it just a new way of creating divisions within France?
Well, it is true that among Muslims you will find some anti-Semitism for different reasons, connected with religion in some cases, connected with identification to the Palestinian situation, and also sometimes also due to Islamic identification. But France is not out of other meanings of anti-Semitism, nationalist, old extreme right, skinheads, people like that, but also some Christian people, old-fashioned, but it still exists. So I would not say it is only Islamic. And we had a big debate recently in this country because 300 intellectuals published a manifesto in order to say the main and maybe only target for fighting against anti-Semitism should be Islam and Muslim, which is an error, a mistake. I would not follow these people because I also see in all the world, including France, nationalist movement, extreme right movement, sometimes also extreme left movements, also using anti-Jewish categories.
And what do you make of the French authorities' response to this growing fear among Jews and departure of Jews to Israel, for instance?
Well, let me tell you that in my country, in France, the French authorities, left, right, or like Emmanuel Macron, center, have always been absolutely clear. No room, no space for any kind of racism or of anti-Semitism. Of course, you can criticize the French politics towards Israel. Of course, you can consider that this country should be more active or have another way to deal with this issue. But there is no space for any kind of anti-Semitism in the French political arena. And what is very important, even the extreme right understood that 10 or 20 years ago, the French extreme right, the National Front, was clearly anti-Semitic. Today, it's different. Marine Le Pen, the leader of the National Front, really wants to say that she is not anti-Semitic. You can have some doubt, you can criticize, you can look at the party itself and say, no, some people are still, but they also decide not to appear as such.
And it's in the Rue des Rosiers, the beating heart of Paris's Jewish quarter, that we leave this edition. Here, shops, restaurants, synagogues, and of course the area's residents all contribute to keeping the Jewish lifestyle and traditions alive and provide an essential facet of the city's multicultural charm. And we'll leave you on these pictures. Stay tuned to France 24.
Hi, I'm Natalie Savarikas, and you'll usually find me in news, reporting on Greece's enduring financial turmoil and protests, but also the refugee emergency, here on France 24.
Natalie Savarikas, one of the 160 France 24 correspondents around the world.